A reading from Mark's Gospel, chapter 4, beginning at the 26th verse. And Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground. He sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows, he knows not how. The earth produces by itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. But when the grain is ripe, at once he puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come." And he said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God, or what parable shall we use for it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which, when sown on the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes larger than all the garden plants, and puts out large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." With many such parables he spoke the word to them, as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them without a parable, but privately to his own disciples he explained everything. We live in an age where there's a great emphasis on DIY and how-to books and all of this. YouTube is filled with 10 ways to do this, top 10 tips for that, and so on and so forth. This is very much an age where we like to think that we are self-reliant. Why? Sometimes I wonder if it's because we like to feel that we're in control of things, in control of our destiny. Don't worry, I can fix it. I've got the right tool, the right knowledge, and so on and so forth. And that goes into the life of the church as well. I've seen no end of these 5 top tips to church growth kind of books, 8 ways to do this, 9 measures of that, 3 essentials of the church, and so on and so forth. But in contrast to all of this, Jesus tells a parable about a farmer who scattered seed on the ground, and then, to quote Jesus, he sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows, he knows not how. The earth produces by itself first the blade, then the ear, and then the full grain in the ear. Now I know that things aren't quite that simple now. I know that farmers nowadays have rather more knowledge of why things grow. But although farming isn't now simply a matter of scattering seed and waiting to see what might happen, nonetheless, you can't predict what will happen. You don't know what the yield's going to be like at the end of the year. You don't know whether this is going to be a good crop or a bad crop. You can see all the charts with all the market data which prove to you how much the prices fluctuate. Things still aren't that simple. You can't control it. You just have to wait and see what will happen with all the many variables that there are. What Jesus is getting at this passage, though, isn't really to do with farming. It's to do with the growth of the kingdom of God. It has a life of its own. It's not something we can fake or force. It's not like rhubarb where you put it somewhere dark and force it on. The kingdom of God has its own life, and it grows in its own way. Yes, of course you must have the essentials. Of course you must scatter the seed, you must pray and worship and read the Bible, but basically, growth is God's business and not yours. And this, I hope, is some comfort to us in a time where the church is weak, where we feel tempted to try and take this measure or that measure, to pour that chunk of money into something to try and turn the corner. Because mustard seeds are small and they grow into large plants. Things are in God's hands. We're simply to do the scattering of the seed and leave the rest to God. Yes, it may be small now, but it will be big later. It was big back then, it will be big once more. We simply have the joy, perhaps, of living in the time when the tide is out. We have that burden to bear. Small beginnings, though, are the very stuff of the kingdom of God. Think of the whole mission and ministry of Christ, beginning as Jesus as a small baby, crying and helpless. Think of Pentecost, when there are just a few disciples on whom the Spirit was poured. The key in all of this is that we have to retain confidence in God and not try and help the old man out, not to think of him as some sort of out-of-date grandparent that we have to help along. Both grain and mustard plants have small beginnings, but grow. You may feel the church is small, but we need to pray that God will make it grow. The problem is we often can't see the end from the beginning. And so we must, perhaps in all of this, take one lesson. And the lesson we should take is that really the growth of the church is a matter for prayer and of faithfulness. It's doing the things that God asks us to do because God asks us to do them, and trusting Him to bring the growth. Yes, there are times when the harvest is small, but it would have been even smaller if we hadn't scattered the seed. We must be those who are willing to continue in that work of prayer and praise and worship of God. That yes, we bear witness to our faith when others ask us, but we can't buy success by throwing money at things. All we can do is pray to the God who gives the growth.